And these recordings, you can find them on in Canvas when you go into the spot where you would link to Zoom. All of those recordings will be listed there in order, so you can go back and review them if you miss a session, or if you just want to go back a few weeks and review some of the previous material. Okay, so with that said, want to share a whiteboard here and start going over some of the policies and procedures for the course for you. So first, talk about the Zoom sessions. Make sure you are answering the poll in Canvas. It's posted out there in week 1, or module 1, I guess I should call it, where you let me know when your availability is. Right now, it's looking like the day of the week doesn't really matter so much to everybody, but it looks like everybody is really kind of pushing for that 7 o'clock time. So we're probably going to stay at this time. We just might move days of the week. What usually I do is 2 things will be the kind of the time. Well, there's 3 things that are really the tiebreaker. If there isn't any strong preference for a given day, I look at the days where there are the most students who cannot attend, and I make sure we get those struck off so that we're not excluding any more students than we have to. I also do have other classes that I do have to schedule in here, so I look at when their preferences are, and I try to fit them together. So when you're making a statement, please make not only give a first choice, but also a second choice. So if there happens to be, I've had it in semesters where I've had 3 classes and all 3 classes chose the same day and time. Just can't make that work. So I like to keep a separate session for each class. The Zoom sessions are not required. So there are no points for these assignments and no penalties. So if you cannot make these sessions every week, it's not going to hurt your grade. It's not required. It's just useful information. It's your chance to ask, any questions that you have if you've managed to start the homework, and to get immediate feedback. I will also answer questions through email throughout the week. So if you're not, usually we try to get these early in the week to get you started on the material. So I realize many of you haven't had a chance to look through the homework yet to get to know what questions you're going to have for the week either. So pardon me, I'm recovering from a bit of a cold here. So sorry if my voice is a little weak and I'm coughing at you. So I wanted to clear that up. You are not required to attend the Zoom sessions. The only real requirement of the course is attendance. As far as the requirements that could be affected by the Zoom session, you must complete at least 2 course activities a week. Now, a course activity could be submitting an assignment. Minimum of 40% completion. We had to include that a couple semesters ago because we had students that would go into our ALEX program, which we'll look at here in a minute, and they would do one question and say, hey, I worked on the assignment. You have to have at least 40% completion. If you're not understanding the topic and your grade is less than 40%, that's fine, as long as you completed 40% of those questions. So that means each week, there are 2 or more assignments submitted. Some weeks there are 3 assignments to submit for the week or more. So that means just submitting every assignment equals your attendance requirement. So as long as you do all the assignments for the week and submit them, you are marked as in attendance. There's no matter whether you make it to these live sessions or not, you cannot be marked absent for that week. So that's pretty easy to meet that attendance requirement. If you do have one assignment that you don't complete, attending the live session can make up for one of those requirements. And then the other option is to have a meaningful contact with the instructor. So send me an email, let me know, hey, I have a question on this problem. I can help you with it, or sending me an ask the instructor question through the ALEC system. All of those are ways that can you can have meaningful contact with me. So if you are marked absent 3 or more times during the course, that would be an automatic withdrawal. This is a financial aid issue because financial aid, if you don't have a minimum attendance, they require refunds and stuff like that. So it's actually a registrar issue, a financial aid issue that comes in there. Or if you are marked absent 2 weeks in a row. So if something happens and you get busy, let me know. If you let me know if there's a problem of any sort, I'm usually pretty flexible with attendance for a week or so. After a week, you really do need to get back in and get back to work on assignments, because if you go longer than a week, it's gonna be really tough to catch back up. But I can be flexible. If you let me know, hey, I've got a major family issue this week or something's going on this week, I'm not gonna get things done. Extended assignments do not count for attendance. So let's say in week 3, you had something came up at work, you couldn't get your homework done that week, you requested an extension. That's fine, but you had to have those 2 things for that week. Since you didn't complete the assignments, you still have to have 2 things for that week that meet your attendance requirement. Requesting the extension, sending me an email to request the extension could be one of those. But you still have to make sure you have some other activity. And then during the next week, completing those late assignments does not count towards your attendance either. It has to be the current week's material. I see there's something in the chat room. What about working ahead? Is that recommended, and does it do anything with attendance? Okay, so that's a very good question. Working ahead is only allowed in a very, very special circumstances. If you have something like you know you're going to have to miss a week coming up, let me know and I can do that. Excuse me. The old system used to allow us, the Connect Math system used to allow us to open up an assignment for an individual student and open it up early. The ALEC system does not allow that. So I would have to open up assignments for the whole class. And my course manager does not like it if we do that. It wants to keep everybody on pace. And there's good reason for that, because the sequencing of the material and getting too far ahead can cause a lot of confusion, especially at the midterm exam, because there are topics that come the week after the midterm exam that can really confuse some of the material for the couple of weeks right before the midterm exam. So you really don't want to be getting into those topics before you take that midterm exam on the previous material. But like I said, if there is something where you know you have to be out of town or have to be away from a computer and it's coming up a week or 2 ahead of time, I can open up assignments a few days or up to a week early for 1 or 2 sets during the semester, but I can't open up the whole semester early for you to work ahead. My course manager would not be happy with that. But that's a good question. So let's talk about what the assignments are. So there are, actually before I do weekly assignments, I should just do regular assignments. Throughout the course, there are certain assignments that are kind of here and there. One is introduction in the first week. Introduce yourself to your classmates so you get to know each other. You're not required to form like study groups or study partners or anything like that. But it's a way that if you do want a study partner, if you do want to connect with classmates, that you can collaborate on your learning and share ideas. Having that introduction out there is a way to know how your schedules fit with each other and what your learning styles, if you have compatible learning styles. There are other things at the end. There's a reflection paper. During exam weeks, there'll be exam review assignments. And then, of course, the exams. But most weeks, there will be two big assignments. Both of them are in ALEKS. One is the weekly practice homework. This is 12 points each week. And it must be completed to 80% or better to open the quiz. And then second each week is the ALEKS quiz. And that, of course, is 24 points per week. And that is completed in the ALEKS system, just like the practice homework. Now, when you're doing this stuff in the ALEKS system, you will notice that in the practice homework, there are help topics. Like show me an example, or solve this. Now, these will use up attempts. You get so many attempts to do a problem, they will use those up, but it'll give you a hint. I recommend trying to do the problem without those first. I have a lot of students that jump in and just, as soon as the problem comes up, they go to one of those help topics and it shows them what to do on the problem. Well, that's great for getting the practice homework done. What it does to you is it allows you to do the homework without really understanding what you're doing. The example problem comes up, you say, okay, you just repeat that on the problem that's there. Well, when it comes to math and statistics especially, doing the process is the easy part. The difficult portion of the problem is figuring out what process applies to that problem. So showing show me the example or those help topics take that decision out of it for you. And that's the most difficult part. So then when you get to the quiz, there's also ask the instructor is one of those help topics, by the way. So when you get to the quiz and you don't have those help topics, now it's more difficult. I have students all the time telling me, well, the homework, I did great on the practice homework, breezed right through it, got to the quiz, and I had no idea what to do. And generally what it comes down to is they use those help topics on the practice homework, and it made it seem real easy, but they really didn't know what they were doing because the help topic was telling them what process to do. So if you do have to use one of those help topics to get through the homework, make sure that each time you use it, you look through the example and figure out why it is they used the process that they used on that problem. That, like I said, that is the most difficult part. If you do have questions on any of the ALEKS, use the Ask My Instructor. Just because what that does is it sends me a copy of the question you are working on so that I can actually look at it. These questions are what we call algorithmic, which means the computer changes the number and sometimes even changes the wording in the question a little bit based on student to student. And so if you just send me an email saying, I'm having a problem on question number 5 of the practice homework this week, I can go into the practice homework and the question I see might be different than the one you are looking at. So that wouldn't be very useful to you if I help you with the question I see. It might be more confusing to you to get that help. Also, using that, the other thing I have students try to do is they try to take a screenshot of the problem they're working on and send me that screenshot as a picture. One of the things with ALEKS in our email system is generally those screenshots get shrunk down and it's almost impossible to read what's in the problem. So save yourself some trouble. If you send me those messages, most likely you're going to get a response from me saying, hey, I don't know what question you're asking me on, and I can't read what you've sent me. Please go back and use that ask the instructor or ask the teacher option in ALEKS so that I can see what question you're asking about. And then, of course, each week, occasionally, there's 5 times throughout the semester, there are application assignments. And these are just worksheets that need to be downloaded, completed, and then uploaded. And I'm back into Canvas. And those are just a little bit, rather than just, clicking in the computer system like ALEKS, they want you to look at the problem, pick it apart a little bit more, show a little bit more of your work in these, because in the ALEKS system, all it really evaluates is your answer. It doesn't really evaluate your process and your work. So in the application assignments, that is the big part, is show your work. Some of the questions, if you just give me an answer, they'll be fine. But some of them would ask you to calculate a sample size or something like that. If you don't show your work, we won't accept that answer. And then, of course, each week, there's an extra credit opportunity. So post a discussion question, and the discussion board is actually posted in each week, so you can click on it. Or answer a classmate. Now, by answer a classmate, I don't mean, yeah, I had the same question, or good answer, Jim, that's what I would have done. But it has to actually either ask an insightful question or give a useful answer, a functional answer to receive the points. And that is every week. I see there's something in the chat again. So the application assignments are strictly through Canvas. They will not be in ALEKS. It's actually usually a Word document, maybe an Excel file of data that you would download. Then you would complete the Word document and upload it. Now, this weekly extra credit is up to 3 points a week. And that is the only extra credit allowed in the course. So that's still 33 points. It's for 11 weeks. So that is 1/3 of a letter grade. And as we designed this course, we decided that was as far as we wanted students to be able to go with extra credit. Every semester we get towards the end of the semester and I have students that ask, can I do extra credit to get my grade up? And unfortunately from the department, the answer is no. Those weekly discussion posts for up to 33 points are really the only extra credit we are allowed to offer. So make sure you're doing them. It's easy points. You just have to come up with, there's always some question you can ask, or maybe you can answer a classmate's question. It's very useful, even if you end up with an A in the course. It never hurts to have those extra points. Once the week has passed, you cannot go back and do that discussion post to get those points. So once we hit week 2, the week 1 discussion posts are over. You cannot go back and get those points. So if we get to the end of the course and you haven't been doing those posts, that extra credit opportunity is lost. Okay, so, oops, there's another chat here. Let me pull that up. The application assignments are due the same day of the week as the ALEKS assignments. They're all due Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. I believe the first application assignment is due week 3. So with the week 3 assignments. And the second one, I believe, is due week 5. And then they kind of go every second or third week from there. It's not really a predictable schedule, but you can see those all posted in the main page or in the assignments tab. They're way down at the bottom if you're looking in there. Okay, so one of the first things you need to do is to make sure you have access to the ALEC system. So if you do not have access to that, you need to contact me right away. There's not a lot I can do to help you, but I can point you in the right direction. Either we have to go through McGraw-Hill's customer service or through the Franklin help desk. Your first option is generally the Franklin help desk. They're pretty good about doing that. Next, I want to talk about exams. So exams are, bad word here, proctored for this course. So that means they can be done one of two ways. You can use a testing center, whether that's Franklin's testing center or another college's testing center. If you don't have a testing center near you, but you want to do the live proctor, Franklin, the testing center can approve a live proctor for you. So if you have like a local library or local high school or someone there, the key is it cannot be someone you know. I've had students in the past that have submitted their mom or dad who is a high school teacher as their proctor. That will get turned down every time because it cannot be a family member. It cannot be someone that has regular contact with you. Even if you use like your HR office at work, it used to be very popular to use work as a proctor, but it can't be your direct supervisor or anybody that works next to you on a regular basis. It has to be somebody disconnected from you on a personal level. So usually your best bet is a testing center, a local community college or college testing center, or a library. Now, if you don't have those, the other option is ProctorU. ProctorU is an online testing proctor. If you're going to use those, they have some tests for your computer to make sure your computer has to have some minimum abilities to be able to use their system. And I will post the requirements for ProctorU in week 2, because by week 2, the tests should be available in ProctorU. In fact, they might be available now, but I like to give the testing center a little bit of time to make sure they've had time to get them out there. But yes, they will be available to sign up, and sign up early. First of all, there's extra fees for a short notice. I believe it's 72 hours. If you register for exam and it has to be done within the next 72 hours, ProctorU will charge you extra for it, just for the rush job. And you might be in danger of not having time slots open. If they don't have available proctors, they can't schedule you. I've had students that waited to the last minute to schedule a test, ended up taking it at like 2 or 3 in the morning because those were the only open times for ProctorU. I mean, it's not guaranteed that they have available proctors at those times either. I've had a couple of students through the last couple of years that have sent me a message. The exam is due at the end of the day Saturday, and they send me a message Friday night. I've tried to sign up in ProctorU and they're booked full. What do I do? Unfortunately, the answer is you're out of luck. Unless you can find a live proctor that quickly that will do the proctoring for you, there's not much you can do. So make sure you sign up for ProctorU early. Like I said, generally I suggest week 2. I will have that announcement posted in week 2 for you. So that would be the best time to get signed up for that. They'll have time to settle into the course and everything else going well for you. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a second. Does anybody have any questions or comments just on course policies and procedures and assignment structures and stuff like that? Okay, let's get going then with our.
Oh, I have a question.
Yep, go ahead.
As far as the applications, when we're downloading, and is it best to print them out and write, or are you just downloading them and then just typing in what we're doing?
Most students just download them and type it out. There are some graphs and tables, and what usually what usually students will do with those is you can use Excel to make graphs and tables, and then copy and paste those into the Word document. The assignments, the application assignments do have to be submitted as Word documents, not as PDFs or anything else. So it is important that you do get them. It's probably easiest just to type them back in that way. Okay, so the tutoring session, that's one of the next things on my list here. Thank you for bringing that up, Tony. So there's tutoring sessions available through the SLC, the Student Learning Center, Wednesdays. In fact, I'm not even totally sure what the times are because, excuse me, I haven't got the official notice from them as to when it is yet, but it's on their website so you can find it. Those are not required. Those are extra help. A lot of students need extra help. Now, the problem with the tutoring session is they fill up fast. We have a problem getting enough tutors and affording enough tutors for these. They are groups that you can get individual sessions, but most of them are group sessions so that you would attend with a small group of students. The only reason I say that attendance is mandatory is once you sign up for them, the Learning Center expects you to go. If you miss sessions, they will drop it for you. It should start as early as tomorrow. That should be correct. So I'm just going to type that out. If you miss sessions, you can be dropped. And that is only because that there's usually way more students requesting those than what they have slots for. So if you're missing sessions, they will drop you and let one of the students on their waiting list get into those spots. Those are usually recorded, so you can contact the Learning Center and just ask, hey, can I have the recordings for those rather than use up a time slot? Can I have the recordings so that I can view those after the session because I can't attend? There's all sorts of things like that the Learning Center, the SLC has that are recorded that you can request. If you have any questions on stuff, maybe even it's using Excel, contact the Learning Center and they can give you links to those to videos that may be very helpful with you with that. Okay. Excuse me just 1 second here. Sorry about that, but I figured you guys didn't need to hear me coughing and sneezing. So let's get to our material for the week. So when it comes to statistics, the difficulty in the early stages of statistics is vocabulary, because it's almost like learning a new language. And it's confounded, it's made more difficult by the fact that it's words that we've heard before, but maybe in statistics they have a very specific meaning. So you're right, there is not a hard textbook for this class. The textbook is actually part of the ALEC system. It's an ebook that you would access through the ALEC system. So when you go into ALEC, rather than clicking on a homework assignment, you can click on the textbook and page through the textbook, or you can click access, read the textbook if you're in a question that you need to go through the textbook and you don't know what to do. So let's talk about some vocabulary. So the biggest, most important concept in statistics is a population. A population is the entire collection of individuals or items that we want to learn about. Now, it's very important to define the population. And it's not as easy as it sounds. For example, we want to predict the results of an upcoming election. Let's say city council. And we have candidate A and B. Well, you might say that our population are candidates A and B because we want to learn which one will win. But that's not really true. We need to think behavior. So the population here is really the voters, and not just voters, but more specifically, the voters who will vote in the election. So, you can't even just say all registered voters, because there are registered voters that won't vote. And there are people that might still register before the election, depending on what the time frame is and what your local rules are on registration. So defining the population and actually figuring out who is in that population can be a little bit tricky. A parameter is a piece of information describing a population. Now, there's all sorts of parameters for this population. They have to be 18 or over. They have to be legal residents of the city. They have to be qualified to be voters, right? However, typically what we want to look at is a parameter of interest. And the parameter of interest describes the population in terms of the goal or point of the study. So here, we don't really care what the age groups are of voters, what their economic or ethnic backgrounds are. We just want to predict who's going to win this election. So the parameter of interest would be what percentage of the voters are going to vote for each candidate. That's the only parameter that we really care about. All the other parameters do describe the population, but they're not really important as far as the study is concerned. But a census is a process of gathering information about a population. The United States government does a census every 10 years. We just did one in 2020. I should say we attempt a census because to be a true census, you actually have to gather information from every item in the population. And we've never successfully done that. There's too many people to do it. But it's the attempt is being made. Now, similar to a population, there's a sample. A sample is a subset of the population. And this is the group that information is actually gathered from. Because we don't, there's a lot of reasons, we'll discuss in a little bit, why we don't draw information from the whole population. We draw from a smaller sample. A statistic is information describing a sample. Now, just like the parameter has a parameter of interest, there's a statistic of interest. Again, that describes the purpose of our study or our experiment. It might be that 60% of our sample says they're going to vote for candidate A. Well, that's a statistic. If we extend that to say, well, we predict that a majority of the population will vote for candidate A, that's a parameter, because even though it's not necessarily backed up by gathered data, it is a statement describing the population. So there's some subtlety there. If you're actually saying what the actual amount from the sample was, that's a statistic. If you're trying to then extend that out to the population, it becomes a parameter. And of course, a survey is a process of gathering information from that sample or about the sample. So when we look at samples, the term comes up all the time. This is a good sample. Well, a good sample is what we call a representative sample. And what a representative sample is where the sample statistics equal or are really close to the population parameters. Now, the problem is we don't know what the actual population parameters are. If we did, there would have been no reason to take a sample. If we knew the parameters, we don't need to try to estimate them. That's usually the purpose of taking the sample. Something called sampling error is the difference between that sample statistics and the parameters. Again, we can never calculate this exactly because we don't know what the exact population parameters are. So how do we measure a sample? Well, we measure it by the selection process. Oh, I'm struggling to type today. Sorry about that. First of all, adequate size. You can't just walk out the door, ask the next two people you see who they're going to vote for, and one says candidate A, the other says candidate B, and then you can't then draw a conclusion and say, hey, the vote's split 50-50. That's too small of a sample. It has to be large enough. Now, what's large enough mean? There's a lot of different disagreements throughout statistics about that. For this course, we'll have some things that come up. In some cases, it will be N is the sample size. You might say that N has to be greater than or equal to 30. Excuse me. Or there might be some other things like N times P has to be greater than or equal to 10 if we're dealing with proportions. Those will become more clear. Right now, those terms and those abbreviations probably make no sense. And those will become more clear as we look at different types of population parameters that we're going to try to estimate. And then, of course, random selection. And that's what I need to talk about now for a little while. Is what is random selection? What is a random sample? A random sample is a sample in which every item in the population has equal chance to be in the sample. Now, unfortunately, that's not adequate. Most of what we do in basic statistics, when you get into more advanced statistics, a random sample is okay. But in basic statistics, we need something a little bit more powerful than that. That's actually called a simple random sample. In a simple random sample, not only does every item in the population have an equal chance of being selected, every possible sample of the desired sample size, so of size N, has an equal chance of being selected. So let's take a look at some examples of sampling and what those terms mean. So first, there's something called a convenience sample, or a sample of convenience. And this is really take the data that is easy to get. And unfortunately, in practice, this is the most common thing because, well, you can't force people to respond. So to make it easier, you send out a flyer to their mail. And realistically, getting back a third of what you sent back is a high response rate. So that's not really a good randomly selected sample because people choose themselves. So most samples have some sort of a convenience in it. So these are not random. And in most studies that you see in the mass media, they are not random samples. There is something called a cluster sample. In a cluster sample, the population is, excuse me. Population is divided into groups. Now, the key is the groups are based on ease of collecting data. So that if they're in the same group, that means that you could collect data from them all at once. Like if you're looking at surveying door to door throughout the city, you might choose a whole city block and everybody on that city block gets sampled. That is the cluster. Rather than choosing individual households and having to run all over the city, you choose several city blocks. Then you just have to go park on that city block and walk around the block and collect the data. So it is based on making the data collection easier. Then the whole group, I should say whole groups, are selected to be part of the sample. So this is random because if the groups are the same size, everybody in the population has an equal chance of being selected. However, it is not a simple random sample. We're going to say SRS for simple random sample. It's not a simple random sample because it is if one person in the group is in the sample, everybody in the group is in the sample. It's not possible to have a sample where only one person from the group is in it. So not every possible sample of that size can be created. There's a stratified sample. Now, again, the population is divided into groups. Now it's based on common characteristics. And this that might affect the data. So this is the big difference between a cluster sample and a stratified sample is the way the groups are formed. In the cluster sample, the groups may not have anything in common other than they're in the same room at the same time, or they live on the same block. Stratified, they have a common characteristic. And then what we do is we randomly select a proportional amount from each group. So rather than selecting whole groups to sample, you're going to select a certain amount from each group. For an example of this might be if you wanted to survey hospital employees. Well, the hospital employees would be nurses and aides, doctors, and then administrative staff. It would make sense to divide them up into those groups because nurses will have different needs than doctors, and administrative staff will have different needs than the doctors and nurses. So you want to make sure that there's some from each group. So that's what the stratified sample is. We divide them into doctors, nurses, and administrative, and then we select some from each of those groups to make sure each group is represented. If the proportion is done correctly, this is random, but it is not a simple random sample simply because it's not possible to have a sample that includes everybody from one group. The whole sample is from one group, whereas a simple random sample has to include that. Now you might be thinking that that's not a very good sample. A simple random sample sounds like a pretty poor sample. Well, it allows for the possibility of really bad samples. And for our statistical processes to be valid, the possibility of getting those really bad samples has to remain so that we can then do the correct calculations to rule it out. Give me just 1 second here again. Okay, sorry about that. So anyway, yeah, it sounds like the simple random sample it has bad samples, but it does allow for them, and we have to allow for them. Our next type of sample is called a systematic sample. In a systematic sample, we randomly select a starting point, and then the system chooses the rest. For example, if you're in manufacturing quality control, if you want to test 1 out of every 100 parts to come off in a process of a line, well, at the beginning of the day, you just randomly select a number between 1 and 100. Let's say your number is 44. That means you start with part number 44. And then every 100th part after that, you choose part 144, 244, 344. And those will be the ones you'd test throughout the day. This is random because every part has a 1 in 100 chance of being selected to be in that sample. However, again, it is not a simple random sample because it's not possible to select 2 parts in a row coming off the line. The system doesn't allow it. So what is a simple random sample? Well, it's literally putting all names or numbers or whatever into a box and drawing out n of them. Remember, n is the size of the sample. So if we have 1,000 students and we want to select 300 of them to be in a study, we put the names of all 1,000 students on a piece of paper, put it in the box, mix them all up. We draw out 300 of them, and there is our simple random sample. It is possible that all those students could be in the same dorm or all those students could be the same major. It's possible. Those would be bad samples, but the simple random sample allows for the possibility of those bad samples so that our processes and our calculations are valid. So the next big question is, why use a sample? Why not use the whole population? When it makes sense, if you gather from the whole population, you know you've got the exact number. Well, there's a lot of reasons. The first 2, of course, are the ones that make the world go around: time and money. It's just expensive and time consuming to try to gather information from too many items or too many elements, especially in a voter thing like the city election. It just takes way too long and be too expensive. It's not practical. Next, it is difficult to define the population. In many cases, we don't know, especially if we're looking at predicting a future event like the election, we don't really know what the population is for sure. Because there might be someone that tells us, nope, I'm not voting in this election, so we don't include them in our population when we do our sample. But then something happens between now and the election and they decide they're going to vote. Or the other way around, someone who is determined they're going to vote, but then on the day of the election, their car breaks down or they get sick or whatever, and they don't get to vote. So the population can be hard to define. Next is changes over time. This might sound similar to item number 3 there, but it's very different. For a sample to be valid, it has to be gathered under the same conditions. So the best way to gather the sample would be snap your fingers and gather it all at once. But in the real world, it takes some time. Well, if any significant events happen during that time, we have to start over because it changes the conditions. For example, back to the election, if we choose who's going to be in our sample, we decide we're going to survey them over the course of 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So Monday, we survey the people we can and we get their information. But then Monday night on the news, a big scandal comes out about one of the candidates. Well, we cannot just come back on Tuesday and keep surveying our sample because the conditions have changed. Many of the people that we've already surveyed may have changed what they're going to do. So we have to start over. So that choosing a sample rather than the whole population allows us to gather the data quickly enough that we can limit those possible changes to the conditions. This next one only applies in an industrial, hopefully not with people at least, destructive testing. If you look at testing a part coming off an assembly line, a lot of times what they do is they put it in a machine and that machine puts force on it till it breaks. And they measure how much force it held before it broke. And then they look at what does it have to be able to hold when we're using it, and they compare to see if that holds up. And then if it's enough larger than what it actually needs to be able to hold, they say, yep, that part would have held. Well, if you test every part, they're all broken and there's nothing left to sell. So you have to take a sample so that you have enough parts left over to sell. You have to test enough to be relatively sure that they're strong enough, but not so much that you kill your profits. Now, there are a lot of other reasons. Those are just 5 that I throw out as some of the more common reasons. There are a lot of reasons why you would take a sample over testing the whole population. So let's talk about, we had mentioned about a question being asked. And that's really the purpose of any of our samples or studies. It could be, you know, who are you going to vote for? How tall are you? Time to complete a task. All those are questions, and there's a multitude of questions we could ask. What we're concerned with is the answer to that question is what we call the random variable. That random variable can either be numerical or what we call quantitative. So the answer is a number. Now, quantitative variables get broken down into two categories. They can be discrete. Discrete means they can be counted. This would be like, how many pencils do you have on your desk? Or how many children do you have? You would just count 1, 2, 3, 4. Or they can be continuous. Continuous is measured. Measured is in like a scale or a ruler or whatever. How long is the pencil that you have that you use? Well, you take a ruler and you measure it. And the thing with, or how tall are you? You would take a ruler or some sort and you'd measure that. And the thing with continuous variables is no matter how close two things are to being the same, it's always possible to be in between them. So all values on an interval are possible. So and all the values in between them are possible. So there's no gaps. Whereas with discrete, there's possible gaps. Now, there's gray areas, obviously. One of them that comes up is time. Well, time, if we ask, how old are you? We're really not asking you, you know, I am 49 years, 6 days, 38 or 18 hours and 12 minutes. It's not asking you to give the exact time since you were born. It's asking, basically it's asking how many birthdays have you celebrated? So you would count those. That would be discrete. However, if we asked, how long does it take you to change a tire on your car? That would be continuous because you'd take out the timer and you'd time it. Now you might say, well, we might time it to the nearest second or the 10th of a second. That could be counted. Well, you have to artificially choose the rounding. Where for the other, if it's a discrete one, there's a natural rounding, like you round to the nearest year for your age. Whereas for time, you have to decide, I'm going to go to the nearest second or 10th of a second or 100th of a second or whatever. And it's arbitrarily, artificially chosen. Now we also have qualitative or categorical data. And so qualitative or categorical random variables put you in a category. In other words, you might ask, what's your favorite color? Well, you'd be put in a category to choose red or blue or green or whatever. Any yes or no questions are categorical or qualitative because it puts you in the category that's in favor or against a certain topic. Which candidate do you plan to vote for as categorical or qualitative? Because it puts you in that category or that group. And then the thing with qualitative or categorical data is you're either in the group or you're not. There is no measurement or anything like that that's taking place. So let's talk about designing experiments. So there are something called randomized experiments. Randomized experiments are where the investigator assigns the treatments to the units at random. Excuse me for just 1 second again. Okay, so an example of this might be we take patients that have a medical condition and we randomly assign them to one of 2 different medical treatments to compare to see which one seems to have more favorable effects on those patients. That would be a randomized experiment. Not to be confused then with the other main type of experiment, which is called an observational study. In an observational study, the treatments are not assigned by the investigator. They already exist. So we have patients that are taking one medication or the other. They've already made that choice for themselves, and we're just going to observe the results on those patients. Now you can see where the randomized experiment might be a little more data valuable for us because we assign the units to the treatments. The observational study, there might be something that causes that unit to pick a particular treatment that might skew the data. Maybe people with higher incomes might choose a particular treatment because, well, it's more expensive, but they think that might mean it's better. Well, there might also be people with higher incomes might also have better diets or other things going on that make it easier for them to recover medically. So we have to be very careful in those observational studies that the groups that are already exist are not somehow predetermined to give a certain result in favor or against one of the conditions. So then our experimental units are the individuals in the study, sometimes called subjects. Outcomes, which we'll talk about a lot throughout the semester, and it comes up in probability as well. And this is just the response measured in the experiment. Whether it's a yes or no question or measurement or whatever, that is the outcome. Treatments are procedures applied to the units in the experiment. So again, it could be different medications, could be exercise programs, diet programs, anything that you want to apply to them and see what happens. Now, one thing that's very important in statistical studies to do something called a blind study, especially in medical statistical studies, so that the unit does not know what treatment they are receiving. And this, it sounds unethical to say we're not going to tell you what medication you're getting, but if the person knows they're getting a medication, or if they know they're getting a placebo, maybe there's not a second medication, maybe it's a control group, psychologically they could influence the results. It's been proven that people that believe they're going to get better actually have a higher chance of getting better. In fact, most medical studies are what we call a double-blind study. Is any, as the experimenter, anybody in contact with the units does not know their treatment. So let's say I'm the person that has to go give the medication to the people in the study. I receive little cups with the number for the patient. This is the patient number 17 gets this medication or whatever. I don't know whether that medication in that cup is the real medication or if it's just a sugar pill or a placebo. Because I might treat the person differently and do something that might affect the way they respond to the treatment. So if I don't know, then I can't unconsciously tip off the unit as to what's going on. When we are working with data, something we have to watch out for is confounding circumstances or confounding variables. These are variables or circumstances that affect our result, but are not measured in the study. The one I always like to do is height and weight. You could gather data and show that as people get heavier, they tend to get taller. Well, does that mean that getting heavier makes you taller? It doesn't mean that getting taller makes you heavier necessarily. Both of those are caused by growing older, the natural aging and maturing process of the human body. So they're not caused by each other. There's an unmeasured variable that's actually the cause that really is linked to that. And so this is true. I keep going back to medical studies, but I'll go back to it again here. In a medical study, you might have patients receiving the two different medications, but let's say some of them, again, come from a home where there's better diets or more emotional support at home. Those are variables that we cannot control in the experiment. We try to control as much as we can. So the best way to do it would be to have them living right in the research center, being fed a specific diet, being forced to adhere to a specific exercise program. But even then, there's only so far you can go to control things. Now, there are other definitions for week one that you need to look at. There are more specific types of studies. For example, cohort studies, retrospect, and several others. The other vocabulary terms that are out there for this week are sources of bias. So those are ones, as you're looking through the materials, those are things to pay attention to and make sure you note. Each week will be kind of like this. I will hit the big topics for the week, but there will be some details like that we just don't have time to cover in 1 hour a week. And we will actually often go to up to an hour and 15 minutes. So 8:15 would be our expected end time, but usually I try to keep it less than that. When will the meets sessions follow your video sessions for each week? Pretty close. The video sessions use PowerPoints to guide me a little bit. The meet sessions are more just what I have kind of put together on my own, but they will be fairly close. So if you do look at my video, pre-recorded video lectures, if you understand those, you're probably pretty well set for the week. Otherwise, the recordings for the meet sessions will be posted usually within a few hours after the session. So usually by tomorrow morning, the link to the recording will be out there and available for you to get to. Any other questions before we close her down for the night? Are these notes available for download? They are not. I've taught this class enough time that I really don't have a lot for notes. I just have a list of topics that I want to hit. So I don't really have class notes, but excuse me. I can put something together and try to load them up for you if I can find them.
Hi, this is Ricardo. I did the prerequisite, but it doesn't say that I've submitted it. How long does it take? I did it last night around 8 p.m.
It will show up in the grade. When I go into Alex and look in the grade book, it shows up as complete. It won't go into Canvas until Sunday or Monday morning.
Okay.
They don't automatically transfer. I actually have to go in and transfer them myself.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions or comments?
Yes. Will the biases in the other topic be hit tomorrow or next session briefly, or?
Nope, those are just
No.
part of the reading. So we won't
Okay.
have time to cover every topic during the week. We'll just hit the highlights. And some of the smaller topics like the biases or stuff you just kind of have to fill in through the homework or through the reading.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you bet.
So last question, is there a certain chapter we should cover to hit these topics?
So when
within
you're
Alex?
going, when you're going through Alex, when you look at the questions, or actually it should show up on top what chapter and section those are from. This first week is mostly chapters 1 and 2.
Okay.
You bet. Anything else? Okay, well, I will shut down the recording, and if anybody has any other questions, I'll stick around here for a little while. Otherwise, you guys have a great week. If anything comes up, send me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, hopefully we'll see most of you back here next week. I will have the time for next week posted probably by the end of the day, Sunday, if not sooner, once I get the results of the surveys in.